The plate shattered before I could even take a bite. Soup splashed across the white floor, dripping over my sandals, warm and humiliating. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood in front of me, trembling with rage. "You sat at the table without asking for permission," she screamed, her voice slicing through the air like broken glass. For a moment, I thought she was joking, that maybe this was some cruel misunderstanding, but her eyes told the truth. Cold. Sharp. Certain. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just looked at her, then at my son Ethan, sitting right beside her, pretending none of this was happening. He didn't say a word, didn't even blink. He just leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and watched. Like I was some old movie he'd already seen too many times. "Say something, Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. But he didn't. He didn't even look at me. The silence was louder than her shouting. It was the kind of silence that kills you slowly, one heartbeat at a time. Vanessa smirked and crossed her arms. "You really think this is your house?" she said. "You sold your old one, remember? This is our home now. You should be grateful we let you stay here." Her words hit harder than any slap. I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made crash down on me. I wanted to shout that I was the reason this roof even existed, that my money, my lifetime of savings, had bought this perfect little apartment she now ruled like a queen. But I didn't. Instead, I bent down and began to pick up the pieces of the shattered plate. Her laughter filled the room, cruel and bright. "Look at you," she sneered. "Always cleaning up what you break. Maybe that's why Ethan never grew up. He always had you to pick up after him." Ethan smiled faintly. A smile. Not for me, for her. I had been silent my whole life. Silent for my late husband when he came home angry and needed space. Silent for my son when he grew distant. Silent for the world when it treated older women as if they didn't exist. But something inside me shifted that night. It wasn't rage. It was colder than that. It was clarity. Vanessa thought this was about a seat at the table. She had no idea that this very table, this apartment, and every wall around her carried a secret that didn't belong to her. A secret I had kept locked away, waiting for the day she'd push me far enough to use it. As she turned her back, wiping her hands and pretending to be done with me, I whispered softly, "You're right, Vanessa. Maybe I don't belong here." She didn't even hear me. She was too busy pouring herself another glass of wine, bragging about her perfect home. Ethan followed her into the living room, leaving me standing alone amid the broken porcelain and spilled soup. When they were gone, I let my eyes wander around the apartment. The cream-colored walls, the glossy furniture, the framed wedding photos of two people who no longer felt like family. Everything sparkled. Everything looked perfect. But I knew better. I knew perfection always hides rot beneath its shine. I walked slowly to my small bedroom at the end of the hall. The air smelled of cleaning spray and loneliness. My knees ached, my chest felt heavy, but my mind was awake in a way it hadn't been in years. I opened the drawer beside my bed, the one they never bothered to touch because they believed I had nothing left to hide. Beneath a folded shawl and a few old photographs, there it was, an envelope. Brown, sealed, untouched. My fingers brushed against its edges. Inside were documents no one else knew existed. Proof that this house, the very one Vanessa was so proud of, was never really hers. My name still existed where she thought it didn't. One mistake in a stack of paperwork that neither she nor Ethan ever bothered to double-check. A mistake that was about to become my greatest weapon. I smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that comes from quiet revenge and hard-earned wisdom. Vanessa thought I was weak because I stayed silent. She thought I was old, harmless, forgettable. But what she doesn't understand, what no one understands, is that the quietest people are often the ones planning the loudest storms. And tonight, when that plate broke, something else broke too, my patience. She sees an old woman standing in her way. But soon, she'll see something else. She'll see what happens when the woman she tried to erase becomes the one who holds all the power. My name is Elaine Foster, and once upon a time, I believed silence was love. For 44 years, I was the wife of a man named George, a quiet, heavy-handed man who believed emotions were a weakness and that a woman's place was wherever she could keep herself busy. I cooked his meals, pressed his shirts, laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. I thought that was devotion. That's what my mother taught me. Love means endurance. When George died of a heart attack on a cold February morning, the house felt like it had exhaled for the first time. There was silence, yes, but not peace. Just an empty kind of quiet that presses against your chest until it hurts to breathe. I remember standing by the window, looking at our yard, the one I'd tended for decades, and thinking, what now? My son, Ethan, was the only thing that kept me moving. He was my light, my reason. From the moment I held him as a newborn, I promised myself he'd never feel the kind of loneliness I grew up with. I gave him everything. My time, my money, my dreams. I turned down job offers to stay home. I stopped seeing friends because, Mom, you don't need anyone else, you have me. I believed him. I built my world around him like a fragile glass dome, and somewhere along the way, I forgot to build one for myself. When George passed, Ethan came to the funeral, stiff in his black suit, eyes red but dry. He hugged me once and whispered, "It's just us now, Mom." I clung to those words like they were oxygen, but I didn't notice how quickly they lost their meaning. Months passed, and the visits became shorter. The phone calls came less often. "I'm busy, Mom." "Work's crazy," he'd say, his voice impatient, always somewhere else. Then one day, he brought her, Vanessa. She was beautiful in the kind of way that photographs love, tall, confident, always dressed like she was heading to a magazine shoot. Her smile was polite, but her eyes scanned my house like a buyer inspecting merchandise. I offered her tea. She declined. I offered conversation. She changed the subject. I knew then, she didn't see me as a mother-in-law. She saw me as a shadow that came attached to Ethan. They got married in a small ceremony I wasn't allowed to plan. "Mom, it's just simpler this way," Ethan said. I smiled and told him it was fine. I told him I understood. Because that's what I always did. I understood. After the wedding, their visits stopped altogether. The calls became texts. The texts became silence. I spent my evenings alone, cooking dinner for 2 out of habit, wrapping the leftovers, and placing them neatly in the fridge, just in case Ethan decided to drop by. He never did. The loneliness grew heavy, a physical thing. I'd sit in the garden watching the sun fade, wondering if anyone would notice if I just disappeared. Then one night, I did something that changed everything. I called Ethan. My voice trembled as I said, "Son, this house feels too big now. Maybe we could find a place together? I could sell this one and help with something new, something better." There was a pause, a silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Then his voice softened, like it used to when he was little. "You'd really do that, Mom?" And just like that, hope bloomed again. "Of course," I said. "Family should be together." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, boxes, and memories. I sold my home, the home George and I built from scratch, for $85,000. Every piece of furniture carried a memory. The creaking floorboard by the kitchen where Ethan used to play. The garden bench where George used to read the paper. Every goodbye felt like a small funeral. When the sale was done, Ethan came with Vanessa. She walked through the house with a faint smile, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "It's quaint," she said, brushing her fingers over the old wallpaper. "But it smells like the past." I smiled, though my stomach twisted. I handed Ethan the envelope with the check. His eyes lit up in a way that used to be reserved for birthdays and Christmas mornings. "Thank you, Mom. This means everything." But his arms, when he hugged me, felt different. They weren't warm. They were polite, detached. That night, as I lay in bed for the last time in my old home, I whispered into the darkness, "Please let this be worth it." I told myself it would bring us closer. I told myself I'd done the right thing. But deep down, a voice whispered a truth I didn't want to hear, that maybe I wasn't buying love, but paying rent for relevance in my own child's life. And yet, I signed every document, packed every box, and smiled through every goodbye. Because I believed what every mother believes, that love is enough to hold a family together. I was wrong. The day I sold my home was the day I unknowingly sold my peace. Ethan and Vanessa arrived that morning in their spotless black sedan, stepping out as if they were royalty visiting an old servant. I watched from the porch while Vanessa looked around, wrinkling her nose slightly, as though the air of my old neighborhood was beneath her. "Well," she said, adjusting her sunglasses, "let's make sure this new place doesn't smell like mothballs." I ignored the sting. I smiled instead. I had practiced that smile for years. "I've already spoken to a few real estate agents," I said softly. "There's a lovely condo on Maple Avenue. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. You'll have plenty of space, and I can take the small room." Vanessa's eyes brightened, not with affection, but calculation. "Maple Avenue," she repeated. "That's one of the better districts. Closer to downtown." Ethan nodded absently, already on his phone, probably checking the listing price. We visited the condo the next day. It was beautiful. Marble floors, tall windows overlooking the city skyline, and the kind of silence that feels expensive. Vanessa twirled once in the center of the living room, her voice honey-sweet. "This one's perfect." Ethan smiled at her, then turned to me. "Mom, what do you think?" I looked at the open space, the sunlight spilling across the walls, and thought maybe, just maybe, this could be a new beginning. "If you two like it," I said, "then it's perfect for me." That sentence was my signature long before I signed a single paper. The realtor led us to an office where we met the lawyer, a weary-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and glasses that made him look both kind and tired. His name was Mr. Harlan. He flipped through the documents carefully before glancing up. "Mrs. Foster," he said, his tone formal yet cautious, "you do understand that this property is being registered under Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Foster's names?" I froze. "Not mine." Vanessa leaned forward before I could speak again. "It's just simpler that way," she interrupted smoothly. "We're younger, easier for the banks to deal with. You know how the system works these days." Harlan frowned. "Simpler, perhaps, but risky. The funds for this purchase are coming from your account, Mrs. Foster. If the deed isn't in your name, you'll have no legal claim to this property." I looked at Ethan for reassurance, my heart thudding like a warning bell I was too afraid to hear. "Mom," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, "come on. You trust me, don't you? It's just paperwork. We're family." That word, family, has a way of silencing common sense. I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. "Of course, I trust you." Vanessa smiled triumphantly. "Good. Then let's not waste time on unnecessary details." Mr. Harlan sighed deeply. He slid another sheet toward me. "Then please, Mrs. Foster, sign here. But if you'll allow me one last piece of advice, keep a copy of everything you sign today. Someday, you might need it." I smiled weakly. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary." I signed. My hand trembled, not because of age, but because somewhere deep inside, something was warning me this was wrong. That little voice, the one I'd ignored my whole life, whispered, "Don't do it, Elaine." But I pressed the pen down anyway, the ink curling into my name like a noose. The moment the papers were signed, Vanessa's tone changed. She was suddenly radiant, her laughter echoing through the office. "Finally," she said, clapping her hands. "I can't wait to decorate." Ethan chuckled, already on his phone, probably calling the movers. I sat there in silence, feeling like I had just traded my heartbeat for their happiness. As we left, Mr. Harlan followed me to the elevator. "Mrs. Foster," he said quietly, "if you ever feel uncertain about this arrangement, please remember me. Here's my card." He pressed a small white card into my hand, his expression grim. "You seem like a good woman. I've seen too many good women lose everything." I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I'll be fine." But as the elevator doors closed, I slipped the card into my purse, my fingers gripping it tighter than I intended. When we stepped out into the bright afternoon, Vanessa was already talking about furniture, about color schemes and curtains. Ethan held the keys in his hand like they were trophies. That night, after they dropped me off at my soon-to-be empty home, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands. They trembled, not from weakness, but from realization. For 40 years, those hands had built a home, cooked meals, wiped tears, and held a family together. But today, those same hands had signed away everything they'd ever worked for. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the tired eyes, the deep lines etched from decades of compromise, and whispered to the woman staring back, "What have you done?" The woman in the mirror didn't answer. She just looked sad. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed boxes in silence, one after another, until the first light of dawn touched the window. I thought about George, about how he'd always said, "You're too trusting, Elaine." Maybe he'd been right. But what none of them knew, not Ethan, not Vanessa, not even Mr. Harlan, was that this wouldn't be the end of my story. This was only the moment I began keeping score. Moving day should have felt like a new beginning. Instead, it felt like a funeral, one where I was both the mourner and the body being buried. The new condo gleamed like a magazine spread. Polished floors, white walls, tall windows, and furniture so modern it seemed allergic to warmth. Vanessa floated through the rooms like a proud queen inspecting her new castle. "Finally," she said, spinning once in the living room. "A place that actually looks like we belong here." We. Not we as a family, we as in her and Ethan. I was just an afterthought, a leftover sentence in a paragraph they'd already finished writing. "Where should I put Mom's things?" the mover asked, balancing two of my old boxes. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. "Just stick them in the small room at the end of the hall." Small was an understatement. It was barely large enough for my bed, a narrow dresser, and a single lamp. No window, just a square vent humming softly like a caged animal. The walls were blank, white, and indifferent. I tried to smile, to tell myself it was temporary. "It's fine," I said quietly. "I don't need much." Vanessa peeked into the room, her perfume sharp enough to sting. "Perfect. You'll have privacy," she said with a tone that didn't sound like kindness. Then she looked around, frowning. "You might want to use a little air freshener in here. It smells lived in." I wanted to ask her what that meant, lived in, but I already knew. It meant old. It meant me. That first night, I unpacked my boxes in silence. Each object was a memory. George's faded photograph, Ethan's childhood drawing, the chipped mug that once belonged to my mother. I placed them gently around the room like soldiers guarding the last pieces of who I used to be. The next morning, I woke early, as I always did, and brewed coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and comforting, at least to me. But when Vanessa walked in, her face twisted in disgust. "What's that smell?" "Coffee," I said softly. "I thought I'd make some for everyone." "I don't drink that," she said, dumping the pot into the sink. "Next time, ask before using my kitchen." Her kitchen. I stared at the empty pot, steam fading like the last bit of my dignity. Ethan walked in, kissed her cheek, and said, "Smells great in here, babe." Then he glanced at me, his smile awkward. Mom, maybe just let Vanessa handle the cooking, okay? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Of course. From that day on, I became invisible. I moved through the condo quietly, like a ghost careful not to disturb the living. Every sound I made seemed to irritate Vanessa. The creak of a door, the sound of my slippers on the floor, even the way I breathed. Could you walk lighter? She snapped once. It sounds like thunder. I stopped walking altogether when they were home. I stayed in my room, reading the same few books I'd brought, their pages soft from years of use. Sometimes, I'd hear them laughing together in the living room, the sound muffled through the wall. It used to make me smile when Ethan laughed. Now it made me ache. Meals became a reminder of where I stood. At first, Vanessa would leave a plate for me on the counter, cold, already picked at. Eventually, even that stopped. You can make your own, she said one evening, when I quietly asked if there was food left. You're not a guest, right? I wasn't a guest. But I wasn't family anymore either. I was something in between, tolerated, but not welcome. The days blurred into one another. I stopped counting them because everyone felt the same. The only time I left the condo was to buy groceries. Small things like bread, milk, fruit. Once, I came home with a bag of apples, proud that I'd found them on sale. Vanessa met me at the door, frowning. Why did you buy that? We already have fruit. You waste money. It's my money, I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. Not anymore. Ethan came out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? Your mother's buying things we don't need, Vanessa said. He sighed, tired, like this conversation bored him. Mom, just ask next time, okay? I wanted to scream. Ask next time. Ask to buy apples with my own money? But instead, I just nodded. Okay. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall until the room spun. I thought about the house I'd sold, the little garden, the chipped fence, the sound of birds in the morning. This place had none of that. It was sterile, perfect, lifeless. Like Vanessa. Weeks passed, and my world shrank to 4 walls and a single chair by the vent. I told myself I could survive it. I'd survived worse. But then one night, I overheard something that turned the air to ice. Through the thin wall, Vanessa's voice drifted, low and cold. I'm tired of her here. She makes the place feel old. We need to do something. Ethan's voice followed, hesitant. She's my mother. She's an expense, Vanessa snapped. And if she's not careful, she might not have anywhere to go. I sat perfectly still, the words cutting through me like knives. I waited for Ethan to defend me, to say anything. But he didn't. He said nothing. That was the night I stopped believing silence could save me. And the night I realized, the woman they thought was powerless still had something they didn't know about. Something that could change everything. It had been almost 2 months since I'd moved into the condo, and every day felt like another test of how much a human soul could quietly endure before breaking. I woke up before dawn just to exist unseen, moving like a ghost between the hours of Vanessa's routines. My coffee mug stayed hidden in my room, my meals were cold leftovers, and my voice had shrunk to whispers. But that morning, the morning everything changed, I woke up with a different kind of silence inside me. Not the silence of fear. The silence of decision. The night before, I had overheard Vanessa laughing on the phone. She won't last long, she said. Old people fade fast when no one needs them. Her laughter rang through the walls, light and cruel. Something in me hardened. When the sun rose, I pulled open my nightstand drawer. Inside, beneath a folded handkerchief, lay Mr. Harlan's business card, the one he'd given me months ago at the law office. I'd touched it 100 times but never dared to use it. I stared at the embossed letters until they blurred. Maybe it's time, I whispered. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then his calm voice answered, "Harlan and Associates, this is Mr. Harlan." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then the words came out all at once, small, shaky, but unstoppable. "It's Elaine Foster. You told me to call if I ever needed help. I think I need it now." He was silent for a second, then his tone softened. "Mrs. Foster, I remember. Tell me everything." And I did. Every word, every humiliation, every broken piece of pride. I told him about the windowless room, the meals that never came, the way my son looked through me as if I were a ghost. He didn't interrupt once. He just listened, the way no one else had in years. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end. Then he said quietly, "Mrs. Foster, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm listening." "The property transfer forms you signed, they were never completed properly. There's a loophole. The donation clause your daughter-in-law insisted on was missing a required verification. Legally, the condo is still in limbo. With your signature, we can register it under your name." I blinked. "Are you saying this place could be mine?" "Yes," he said simply. "And it should be. You provided the money. You have every right. If you want, we can fix it quietly. They'll never know until it's official." I felt dizzy. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. For the first time in months, something other than pain filled my chest. Hope. "But is it right?" I asked weakly. "They're my family." His voice softened. "Family doesn't make you smaller, Mrs. Foster. It doesn't take your voice away. You've earned the right to protect yourself." Protect myself. The phrase felt strange, heavy, and alive. That afternoon, while Vanessa was at work and Ethan was out, I took the bus downtown. It was the first time I'd left the condo without asking permission. I sat by the window, watching the city pass in blurs of color and light, the reflection of an older woman staring back at me, one I barely recognized. But her eyes were awake. Mr. Harlan greeted me with a kind smile and tea that smelled of mint. He spread a folder across his desk, papers neat and ready. "If you sign these," he said gently, "the condo will belong to you. Entirely." I looked at my name printed in crisp black letters, Elaine Foster, sole owner. 4 years, my name had been attached to everyone else's, George's wife, Ethan's mother. But here, it stood alone. Whole. My hand shook as I took the pen. "Once I sign," I asked softly, "they can't take it back?" He smiled. "No one can take what's legally yours." I nodded once. "Then let's make it official." The pen glided over paper. Stroke after stroke, my name rewrote the story they thought they'd finished. When it was done, Harlan gathered the documents and said, "It'll take 1 week to process. Until then, keep this to yourself." On the bus ride home, I held that secret like a treasure. I watched the sunset paint the skyline gold and thought of all the times I had bowed my head, swallowed my pride, and convinced myself I had no power. Now, power was quietly sitting in my purse. When I reached the condo, Vanessa was in the kitchen, talking on speakerphone, her laughter echoing. "I can't wait to redo the living room," she said. "It's our space after all." I walked past her, silent, smiling to myself. Because now every inch of that space, every tile, every wall, was mine. That night, I sat on my bed, the brown envelope of documents under my pillow, and whispered to the dark, "You took my peace, but I took back everything else." For the first time in months, I slept deeply, not from exhaustion, but from satisfaction. Vanessa thought she'd won. Ethan thought I was finished. But neither of them knew that the woman they buried under silence had just learned how to rise. And soon, they would find out exactly what silence sounds like when it starts to roar a week past. A quiet, fragile week in which everything looked the same on the outside, but nothing was the same inside me. Vanessa still barked orders, Ethan still looked through me, and the condo still shimmered in artificial peace. But I moved differently now. I walked slower, not out of weakness but control. I listened more, not because I feared them, but because I was planning. The papers were ready. Mr. Harlan had called 2 nights earlier, his voice steady. "It's done, Mrs. Foster. The condo is officially in your name." When I hung up, I didn't celebrate. I just sat in silence, staring at my hands. Those hands had once signed away everything. Now they had reclaimed it all. Vanessa decided to throw a dinner that Friday. "Something classy," she said, "for friends who actually matter." Ethan nodded like a shadow beside her, agreeing with everything she said. When she told me, she added with that familiar sharp smile, "Try not to embarrass yourself this time, Elaine. Just stay quiet and let the adults talk." I nodded and smiled. "Of course, Vanessa. I'll stay quiet." The evening came dressed in soft jazz music, expensive wine, and fake laughter. The dining table was set with silverware I'd bought and napkins I'd stitched years ago, things Vanessa now called hers. The room smelled of roses and deceit. Her guests were polished, loud, and eager to please her. They barely looked at me. One woman leaned toward Vanessa and whispered, "Oh, is that your housekeeper?" Vanessa laughed softly. "Something like that." I kept my eyes on my plate, hands folded, breathing slow. I'd waited my entire life for this kind of silence, not the kind they forced on me, but the kind I chose. Halfway through dinner, Vanessa raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling. "To our beautiful home, and to hard work paying off." Her words hung in the air, shimmering with pride. Then she looked at me. "Don't you agree, Elaine? You're lucky to live somewhere this nice." Every guest turned toward me. The laughter dimmed, replaced by curiosity, the kind that smells of pity. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I smiled, calm and steady. "You're right, Vanessa. I am lucky." She smirked. "Good. As long as you remember who made that possible." The room chuckled. I placed my fork down gently. "You're absolutely right. I should remember who made this possible." I reached into my purse and pulled out a brown envelope, the same one that had slept under my pillow all week. My fingers didn't tremble this time, because sometimes people forget who truly owns the roof above their head. Vanessa blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan frowned. "Mom, what are you doing?" I stood slowly, the chair legs scraping against the floor like thunder. The room fell silent. I slid the documents onto the table, their official seals gleaming under the chandelier light. "This," I said softly, "is the deed to this condo. It's under my name now. Legally. Permanently." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "You're lying," she hissed. "That's impossible." "Ask the lawyer," I said. "Or better yet, check the property records tomorrow. You'll find my name printed where you thought yours was." Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the floor. The guests gasped. Ethan stood up, face pale. "Mom, I don't understand." I turned to him, the boy I once would have died for. "You will," I said softly. "You'll understand everything you let her do to me. Every insult you ignored, every moment you pretended not to see. Because now, you and your wife will learn what it feels like to be guests in someone else's home." Vanessa lunged forward, her voice cracking. "You can't do this. You wouldn't dare." I stepped closer, calm as stone. "I already did." For the first time, her confidence broke. She looked around the table, desperate for support. But her guests sat frozen, eyes wide. The perfect hostess was suddenly a stranger to them. "Dinner's over," I said quietly. "You can leave." Vanessa stared at Ethan, waiting for him to take her side. But he just stood there, lost, caught between guilt and fear. "Elaine," he started, voice trembling, "we can talk about this." "No," I interrupted. "You've both talked enough. Now it's my turn to live in peace." I turned and walked toward my room as they stood speechless in the wreckage of their pride. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's glass heels clicking against the floor, fast and angry. Then came the sound of something else, a crash, a scream, a door slamming. For years, I dreamed of reclaiming my dignity. I thought it would come with tears or shouting. But it didn't. It came in silence, the kind that demands to be respected. That night, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. The condo felt different, lighter, freer, alive. I whispered to myself, "It's over." But I was wrong. The next morning, I would learn that people like Vanessa don't go down quietly. And silence, once broken, can turn into something much louder. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, soft and golden, but the house was heavy with storm. The night's chaos still lingered in the air like smoke. Shattered glass, overturned chairs, the faint smell of wine and fury. I could hear muffled voices from the hallway, Vanessa's trembling, Ethan's defensive. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, my table now, with a cup of coffee that tasted like victory and sorrow mixed together. I had imagined this moment for so long, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt quiet, empty in a way I hadn't expected. Ethan appeared first. His face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, his confidence gone. "Mom," he began, his voice cracking, "I didn't know she'd—" I raised a hand. "Ethan, stop. You didn't want to know." He looked down, shame painting his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought keeping peace meant staying silent. I was wrong." For a moment, I wanted to tell him that sorry was too small a word, that it couldn't fix years of neglect or buy back the respect he'd traded for comfort. But when I looked at him, truly looked, I saw not the man who'd betrayed me, but the boy I'd once rocked to sleep. The one who used to run to me after nightmares, trusting that I could fix anything. So instead of anger, I said softly, "You can't undo what's been done, Ethan. But you can decide who you'll be from this moment on." He nodded, tears finally spilling down. "I'll fix it, Mom. I promise." Before I could respond, Vanessa stormed in. Her hair was disheveled, her voice raw. "You think you can just take everything," she shouted. "This isn't over." I turned toward her, calm as ever. "Vanessa, it was never yours to take." She took a step forward, fury blazing, but Ethan stepped between us, for the first time. "Enough, Vanessa," he said firmly. "This is my mother's home, and you need to leave." She froze, eyes wide. "You're choosing her over me?" "I'm choosing what's right," he said quietly. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Her scream was sharp and broken. She grabbed her purse, slammed the door, and for the first time in years, silence returned. Not the suffocating kind, but peaceful, healing silence. Ethan sank into the chair across from me, his hands trembling. "I don't know what comes next," he said. I smiled faintly. "None of us ever do. But sometimes, losing everything you thought you wanted helps you find what you truly needed." Days turned into weeks. The condo changed, not in walls or furniture, but in air. Ethan stayed for a while, helping repair what had been damaged, both in the house and between us. We spoke more, not like strangers sharing space, but like family learning to speak again. He started calling me Mom the way he used to, without guilt in his voice. One afternoon, as I tended to the small balcony garden Vanessa had always ignored, Ethan brought me tea. "You could sell this place," he said softly. Start fresh, somewhere peaceful. I looked out at the skyline, the city stretching endlessly. No, I replied. I'll stay. This place was built on silence, but now it can echo with something better, truth. He smiled, quiet and grateful. That night, I opened the window and let the cool breeze in. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the fear, the strength I never knew I had. Life doesn't always hand you justice on a silver plate. Sometimes, it gives you broken pieces and dares you to build something new. And I did. When people ask me what I learned through all of it, I tell them this. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength waiting for the right moment to speak. Because in a world that underestimates the quiet ones, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait, and then rise. I lifted my cup of tea, looking at the stars, and whispered, I'm home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone like Elaine needs to remember, it's never too late to stand up, speak out, and take back your peace. Backhand index pointing right, more real-life stories. More lessons that stay.